Okay, so in this video, we're going to talk about how to solve quadratics by factoring, which I think is probably a review if you are familiar with factoring. So first of all, what do I mean by a quadratic? So we're talking about things that look like this form. So ax squared plus bx plus c. So this a, b, and c are numbers, and a cannot be 0. So it's really something that has like a squared term in it a lot of the times. Okay, so I think solving quadratics by factoring a lot of times, like I said, I think it's review. So the idea behind this is that to solve a quadratic by factoring, you'd want all of the terms on one side. So you want the equation equal to 0. And then what you do after that is you just factor. So in this case, this would factor as x plus 6 and x plus 1. And so the idea behind this then is that you take each one of these factors. So here's a factor, here's a factor. So what you would do is you would set each factor equal to 0 and solve. And then that will give you your two solutions. So in this case, my first factor would be -6, and this one would be -1. So these would be my two solutions. Now, I think what most people do is when they look at this step here, they just take the opposite of whatever number they see. That's what most people do. But the reason why this works is because you're technically setting them equal to 0, even if you are doing it in your head. Okay, so that's the technique. So what I would like you to do is I would actually like you to pause the video and let's just make sure that you've got the basics of this. So try this one. Math is not a spectator sport. You'll get more out of the video if you try. So let's just make sure you've got the basics. Hit play when you think you've got it. So this will factor as x minus 4 and then x plus 3 equals 0. And then like I said, so most people just, I think, take the opposite of whatever sign they see. So this will be x equals 4 and x equals -3. So those would be my two solutions. Okay, so for the rest of this video, I kind of want to look at ways that this could be harder because this is like the basics and I feel like most people kind of get the basic idea. So ways that this could present itself with a twist on factoring. So like in this case here, so this would be an equation that is not set equal to 0. So the best practice here is to always have your equation equal to 0. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add 6x. So I have x squared plus 6x plus 9 equals 0. And then from there I can factor x plus 3 times x plus 3 equals 0. So this is technically now x plus 3 squared equals 0. So there's only one solution. So this, because the solution is really repeated, so it's just x equals -3 in this case. Okay, so this is the idea. You really need to have everything equal to 0. And I bring that up because this next one tends to mess with a lot of people's heads, where people will just try to take the square root, and you can't do that. Okay, technically you can do that, but in this video I'm going to say you can't do that. So I want you to use factoring. So if you're going to factor, then you need to bring everything over to one side. So I want you to bring the 25 over to the other side and then see if you can factor and hit play when you think you've got it. So if I subtract off the 25, once I subtract off the 25, I can see why like this will factor. So this becomes x plus 5, x minus 5. So there's actually two solutions here. Now, if you're saying, oh, wait, but I would have just taken the square root. So that's a little nuanced. And there is a way to solve this with using square roots, but that's for another video. And a lot of times what happens is people will take the square root and they'll only take the positive part of the 5 when there's actually two solutions. So when you're using factoring, it will actually allow you to make sure you pick up the two solutions. Okay, so let's move on to another one. So I've got x squared plus 7x. Okay, so sometimes people get into computer mode and they're like, oh, it's squared, so it's got to be a trinomial, so I've got to factor it. So this only has two terms. So what is the realistic way that I can factor this one? For this one, this isn't a trinomial. This is going to use the old GCF technique. So I can factor x out, and then this becomes x times x plus 7. And then once again, I have two terms. So sometimes this first x messes with people. So you just want to remember each thing that is being multiplied together needs to just be set equal to 0. So my first solution is just x equals 0. It's that simple. Bada bing, bada boom. And the second solution will be x equals -7. Okay, so now let's keep going. Okay, so this looks like a nightmare to factor at first. So I've got 1/10 x squared plus 1/2 x plus 3/5 equals 0. So there is a little hack that we want to use. I don't want to deal with the fractions, so I'm just going to I'm going to use that age-old technique of finding the LCD of all fractions. So I've got 1/10, 1/2, and 3/5. What's the LCD of all of these? The LCD in this case would be 10. And then we've used this technique before, right? So I'm going to multiply everything by 10. So when I multiply by 10, so I'll just go through how do you actually do your cancellations. So here, the 10 and the 10 cancel out. So what am I left with? I'm left with 1 times x squared. So this will just leave me with x squared. How many times does 2 go into 10? 2 goes into 10 5 times. So look at what I'm left with. I'm left with 1 times 5 times x. So this is just going to be plus 5x. And then finally, for this last pairing, 5 goes into 10 twice. So what am I left with? 3 times 2. 3 times 2 is 6. So here's what I need to factor. Oh man, I will 100% factor that over the craziness that we started with, right? So using the LCD is a really helpful trick here. So this will factor x plus 2 and x plus 3. So this is just x equals -2 and x equals -3. Okay, and so for the last one, so I've kind of thrown a bunch of different techniques at you, and so now I just want to kind of leave this one to you. So why don't you factor this one, and when you think you've got it, hit play when you're ready. Remember, math is not a spectator sport. Okay, so the first thing I notice about this is that I can actually factor out 2x, so that's where I'm going to start. So this becomes x squared plus 14x plus 45 equals 0. And then this will factor, so this becomes 2x, x plus 9, x plus 5 equals 0. So the plot twist here is now I actually have 3 factors. So this first one, I'm just going to say x equals 0. 2x equals 0 means x equals 0. X equals -9, and x equals -5. So those are my 3 solutions in that case. Okay. So that's it for this video. If you found this helpful, I'd love it if you hit the like button or the subscribe button. That would be super cool. And I will talk to you guys in another video. Thanks for watching.